I don't know if it counts as human behavior, but I had a strange experience with my little dog. It has happened several times, but none were like the first time. She is a boxer, but she's always been a bit smaller for her breed. She was the smallest of her litter and had only been at the house for a short time, less than a week. She's always been super curious, and especially when she was little, she would get into everything and smell everything she could in the house. At that time, probably because she was in a new home, she was a bit more skittish and cautious. We were trying to train her, mainly to go to the bathroom outside in the yard. We were particularly worried about her peeing inside the house while we were asleep. So my siblings and I took turns staying outside with her until she did her business before we went to bed. That night it was my turn. I closed the door to the house and waited for her to do what she needed to do. But as usual, she first got distracted by the plants and some other things in the yard. She was playful and jumping around when, suddenly, she stopped completely still, staring directly outside through the gate. All my neighbors had already turned off their lights, so the only light came from a small one behind me. Then she turned and looked directly at me. She was standing right on the edge where the light didn't reach, in the shadows. From the distance, I couldn't see the white parts of her eyes, and they looked completely black. At that moment, I don't know why, but I got goosebumps all over my body. There was no noise, and she was as still as a statue. I tried calling her by name, but she didn't move a muscle. She stayed like that for a good 2 minutes. Even though she was so small at the time, she felt very imposing, and even dangerous. She didn't growl or bare her teeth, but she stood there staring at me with those completely black eyes. Then, as if nothing had happened, she started moving normally again, came up to me as usual, and everything was normal from then on. It took me several minutes to calm my nerves and several days to interact with her normally again. Since then, I've seen her like that again, in the darkness of the rooms, staring at me directly with her black eyes. I've decided to believe she does it to check if we are okay, but the anxiety of feeling that way again is a thorn that, even 7 years later, is still present inside me. Dogs always behave strangely around me, but only at certain times of the day, like during mirror hours or after 7 p.m. I try not to go outside at those times since my presence seems to threaten them in some way. At least that's the feeling I get. They bark at me all the time, but when they don't, sometimes they just stay still, staring at me. Some people don't believe me, but I've seen how they stand on 2 legs while watching me with a threatening look. This makes me very uncomfortable because it feels like a human being is watching me from a blind spot. And in case you're wondering, no, they aren't leaning on anything. They just stand on 2 legs. When this happens, I get the most nervous. If they start barking, their owners usually come out to calm them down and see what's going on, only to find that it's just me walking by. But when they're standing there observing me, well, that's a very creepy feeling. It's like being stalked by a person. It's a terrible experience that I wouldn't wish on anyone. It's very strange that this only happens with dogs and no other animals. It's curious because they never attack me or even try to. They just bark at me from a distance or stand on 2 legs and watch me until I walk away far enough for them to forget and return to normal. And obviously, I have no idea why this happens. It's just something very strange that I hope will finally stop one day. I had a bad experience thanks to my cat, Gustavito. We had an elderly neighbor who always stood on his terrace to look at the horizon, and from there he could also see our terrace and yard because his house was 1 floor higher. The neighbor always said, "How annoying is your gray kitty?" because my Gustav always entered his house to steal bread. The neighbor never mistreated my cat, but he didn't have any fondness for him either. One day the neighbor passed away. A few days went by, the wake, the burial, and little by little, everything returned to normal. Until one morning, I went up to see my cat as usual. He was sitting there, and when I approached, he turned to look at me and came closer. But in the middle of his walk, he stopped as if there was an invisible wall in front of him and started growling in a horrible way, something he had never done before and hasn't done since. I then realized that the cat wasn't growling at me. He was staring fixedly above me, towards the neighbor's terrace. I didn't know what to do. I was petrified and didn't have the courage to turn around. I just kept saying, "Gustavito, it's me. Look at me." But the cat remained in that state, and it felt like an eternity to me. At some point, I gathered the courage and picked up the cat. Gustav was trembling and growling uncontrollably in my arms. That's when I turned towards my neighbor's house, and there was absolutely nothing there. I was so scared that I ran inside with Gustav to his little room on the terrace. Some of my family members came up, worried because I hadn't come down, and found both the cat and me trembling. I told them what happened, and for my peace of mind, someone said that surely the neighbor's ghost had come to say goodbye to his house, and Gustav had seen him. Just remembering this still gives me chills. A few months ago, a dog appeared at our house. We soon found out that it belonged to our neighbors, but they didn't treat it well. They always let it roam the streets and didn't feed it. It was honestly a mess. So, after I begged my parents, we finally adopted it. However, over time, I started noticing some rather strange, if not disturbing, behaviors in him. I remember one time I was in my room, sleeping peacefully since no one else was home. I don't know how much time passed, but suddenly I woke up to the sound of the television. I thought my mom had come home because I started hearing laughter, so I went to greet her, but I got a horrible surprise when I noticed that the only one there was my dog, sitting on a chair like a person with an open magazine in front of him. I felt an enormous fear and quickly decided to lock myself in my room. About half an hour passed, and then my mom came home. I heard the television turn off and something like a book or a magazine being thrown against the glass table. Besides this, the dog also does other strange things, like staring at us in a very odd way while we're sleeping or in the bathroom. I also remember something that happened once when my mom and I were watching TV. At that time, he was used to sleeping in my parents' room where we were. I was already half asleep, but my mom was awake. She suddenly started shaking me and said, Look at what the dog is doing." When I turned, I saw that he was bringing his bed, which was a pretty heavy mattress, along with his blanket. This wasn't strange by itself, but then he started making his bed in a very peculiar way and then lay down to sleep. I swear, my mom and I were both quite puzzled and a bit scared, to be honest. In addition to all this, more things have happened. However, although this dog sometimes scares me a little, in general, he is a very good pet, and we love him a lot. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to leave a like. We upload 3 videos a week, so subscribe and activate the bell to become a member of this creepy world. My sister told me an anecdote that her ex-father-in-law shared with her. It happened in Veracruz. The man had a cat with gray and black spots on its face and a notched ear. He named it Solo Vino because one day, it just appeared in front of his house, and they decided to adopt it. Everything seemed to be going well until they noticed the cat exhibiting strange, almost human behavior. Sometimes they would hear it laughing, and other times it would call the man's wife Mama. One night, the man was having a cup of coffee while lying in his hammock. The cat, having finished eating, stood on 2 legs and stared at him, saying, "Well, I'm off now." The man jumped up in fright and yelled, "I'll shoot you if you don't leave." He ran into the house and told his wife what had happened. They both started praying and never saw that cat again. My grandmother, rest in peace, worked cleaning the house of a man. They both lived in a rural area. Every day she had to walk 4 kilometers to and from work, so she had to leave very early to be back in time to have lunch ready at home by noon. This meant she would leave at 5 in the morning to work. What I'm about to tell happened in the winter, when the nights are longer. That morning, she left her house with an hour and 20 minutes of travel ahead of her. Luckily, that particular night, the moon was lighting the way. At a certain point in her journey, there was a stream, and when she was a few meters away from it, my grandmother began to feel something strange, a dense presence. She felt scared but decided to ignore it and just continued on her way. However, she soon felt the presence more strongly and realized it was a black dog, a presence that was not good at all. So, she only glanced at it from the corner of her eye while quickening her pace. The dog then started walking alongside her. Suddenly, my grandmother noticed that the animal stood up and started walking on 2 legs, very quickly but clumsily, step by step like a human. At that precise moment, she felt immense fear and began to pray the Our Father, the only prayer she knew at the time. She finally reached the stream, and when she crossed it, the dog simply stayed behind. She didn't want to turn around, but felt it was still watching her for a while longer. So she just crossed herself and thanked God for his help. Since then, she started using the horse to go to work, even though it wasn't very tame, and she only left the house when the sun was about to rise. Thank you very much for reading my story. I send you a big greeting. What I am going to tell you is recent. I doubt many will believe me. I wouldn't believe it either. In fact, I haven't told anyone for fear they'd think I'm crazy. But it's completely real. It began in May when my nephew adopted a stray cat. However, since his dog had puppies that were still newborn, he asked if the cat could stay here in the store. It only took one night for it to adapt to its new home. My mom and I weren't too happy about it since it left fur everywhere. But we had no choice because my sister is currently pregnant, and we couldn't have the cat upstairs. Everything had been going well for a while. However, everything changed one day when I came back after getting some tacos. The cat got excited, thinking I was going to feed it, and came up to me begging for food, but I didn't give it any. When I went to the bakery next to the business where I work to add some sauce to my tacos, I heard a voice which I thought was from a customer. When I came back, I didn't see anyone. But when I turned around, the cat was there, standing on two legs trying to reach the tacos I had left on the table. When it realized I was watching, it went back to acting like a normal cat. I thought I had imagined it or something. But later that same day, when I was closing the store, I noticed the cat was looking at me with a hateful, angry expression. It didn't seem like the look of a cat. It looked more like a human stare. When my two nephews came downstairs, the cat stopped looking at me and acted as if nothing had happened. Since then, every time we are alone, the cat gives me that same look. Sometimes when I come downstairs, I see it walking on two legs, and I've even heard it speak. The curious thing is that I'm not the only one who has seen it. Once, a customer, after returning from the bathroom, told me he saw the cat walking on two legs and coming straight towards him. This scared him so much that he decided to leave. To this day, that cat is still here. When I eat or do something, it follows me with its eyes in a very strange way. We've thought about giving it away, but whenever we talk about it, the cat disappears for a few days and then comes back. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel watched, and the more I look into its eyes, the less they seem like a cat's eyes.